latest podcast, The Heidelcast.
It's a Heidel minicast. And now, Scott Clark.
While and through mean different things.
If the Heidelcast helps you, won't you help us keep it going? Please make the coffer clink by clicking on the PayPal link or by sending a check to Heidelberg Reformation Association, 1637 East Valley Parkway, number 391, Escondido, California, 92027.
You know, talking to people about things can be awkward, and I think social media has changed the way we relate to one another. So one way you can let people know that you listen to the Heidelcast and read the Heidel blog is to wear Heidel stuff. And the way you can do that is to go to the Heidel shop. Yes, of course, it's the Heidel shop. It's at heidelblog.net/SHOP, or just go to the Heidel blog and you'll see there a link to the Heidel shop. All kinds of cool stuff in there, and it's just fun to wear around. And somebody may say, hey, what is that Heidelcast? And then you can answer their question. It'll be very natural, very organic.
The Heidelcast.
I realized in the last few episodes of the Grammar Guerrilla, this is number 12 in the series, that I have forgotten to mention some writers. I was doing that in the first few episodes, and I thought, you know, one of the writers whom I enjoy reading the most is Mike Horton, which is, I'll tell you a story. It's not hilarious, but it's kind of interesting, kind of amusing. I was a pastor in Kansas City, and I had made a pastoral call somewhere in the southeast part of the metro to see someone about something. I don't really remember. And on the way home, I stopped at a local Christian bookstore, which used to be a thing back then. There used to be Christian bookstores dotted around metropolitan areas. Maybe they still exist, but I don't see them as often. In fact, another digression. One of the turning points in my Christian life was Logos Bookstore. It was a chain of Christian bookstores that specialized, it seemed to me, in stocking better than average quality books. That's where the clerk introduced me to J.I. Packer and John Stott. So he recommended Basic Christianity. I remember where I was when I read that, and Evangelism and the Sovereignty of God. And they also had records and stuff, but it wasn't full of junk and, you know, knickknacks and stuff. It had some content. Anyway, sadly, I think they're long gone. But at any rate, I stopped at this Christian bookstore and I looked in the, discount bin. Remainders, I guess is maybe what they're called. And I picked up this book. It was called Mission Accomplished, and it had a picture of a teenage boy, I think 15 on the back, and it was on the atonement. And I thought, well, that's outrageous. A 15-year-old kid. Who publishes a 15-year-old kid on the atonement? That's nuts. So, of course, I bought the book. I took it home, and I read it. And it was a really good book. And I thought, that's amazing. This is a good book. And it's written by a teenager. Well, of course, that teenager was Mike Horton, and that was his first book. We did not meet, actually, until 1993, and not even in the U.S. It was in the U.K. Bob Godfrey came over to do something for the Banner of Truth, and I didn't know it at the time. Mike was in town, and I was in town, and so we got together. And in fact, I think 2 nights in a row, that's how I met Mike, and we made, I think, Bob buy dinner 2 nights in a row, which was nice. Anyway, so that's how we met, and that's how I met Mike in literary terms. And even though we've been friends and I've known him all these years, I still read everything that he publishes. And the reason is not just because I tend to agree with him and we're in the same tradition and in the same denomination and work at the same school, but because I've learned so much from him. And one of the reasons I've learned so much is, A, well, he knows a lot. It's phenomenal what he knows. But B, he writes really well. He writes in an engaging style. It's intelligent. It's, I think, relatively, most of the time, accessible. He writes popular books that are more accessible and technical books that are less accessible. But, even among technical writers, he seems to me to be an accessible writer. What makes him accessible? Well, I think he chooses his words carefully. His sentences are not overly complex, needlessly complex. And I think he, as far as I can tell, seems to care about the reader, which I think is one of the major components of being a good writer, is actually having a care about the reader. how does the reader experience this? Does this make sense to the reader? Does this help the reader? I think, frankly, people who ask those questions tend to be better writers than people who don't ask and answer those questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Clark.
So in this episode, I want to talk about the distinction between while and though, W-H-I-L-E, and though, T-H-O-U-G-H. The distinction between those two words is neglected, but it needs to be recovered. The writer who observes the distinction between while and though is clearer and more useful to his reader, which is, as I say, one of the goals of good writing. Most often today, even in edited publications, for example, newspapers, magazines, and books, inasmuch as anything is really edited anymore, although I will say we have copy editors who go through everything that is published, and that's been the case since when we organized in about 2021 or so, sometime in 2021. I don't remember exactly. So you'll notice a difference in the things that were written between 2007 and 2021. Those years, those things were not closely, carefully edited, to my shame. Especially when I started, I didn't take it very seriously, and I would sort of lightly proof things. I mean, obviously, I'm looking at the screen, but I didn't do some basic things like printing out the text and giving myself some time and then going back after a little while and looking at it on paper with a pen in my hand and marking it up, which is what you do when you're doing proper proof reading. And I just didn't do that. I didn't have time. I was working another job, a full-time job, while I was doing all this writing, and I was just cranking out these sort of popular essays or semi-popular essays. I mean, popular in as much as people were reading them and meant to be accessible to a lot of people. Anyway, there's a difference in contrast to a lot of other publications that we do try to proofread things, and we do have copy editors that go through things. So anyway, even in what are supposed to be edited publications, one sees these two words, while and though, used interchangeably, as if both only signal a concessive clause, is what that is known as. And this is incorrect. Not because English doesn't change, it does, but because some changes, as I keep saying, signal a decline rather than an improvement. Well, what's a concessive clause? Well, I'll give you an example. Joey usually goes outside, though he does not go outside when it is very hot or very cold, period. The clause that begins with though is a concessive clause. It concedes certain things to be true that are perhaps an exception to what was said in the main clause. It's a kind of subordinate clause. So as often is the case, the solution here begins with definitions. While now, as it has been since the 10th century, has reference to the passage of time. Say that again. While has reference to the passage of time. Listen to this now. Even the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, who said he wanted a brain, knew that.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Do? Why, if I had a brain, I could while away the hours.
Okay, did you hear that? He could while away the hours. It's an older usage of the word, but what does while mean there? It means to pass the hours. That's what while means. He could while away the hours because he knew, Scarecrow knew, the brainless, apparently, although how he was able to speak without a brain, I don't know. How he's able to do anything since he's full of, hey, I don't know. It's a movie. It's a story, anyway. But he's able to use while away the hours because even he knew that the verb to while meant to pass time. If we remember that the word while has reference to the passage of time, right, and as a verb means to spend time, then we can see a clear difference between while and though. If you mean to signal the passage of time, use while. While Joey Bag of Donuts stood lookout, Louie ransacked the bodega looking for Doritos. Shame on you, Louie. Turns out those are not very healthy for you. But anyway, Joey was doing one job and Louie another, but they were doing them simultaneously. Hence, while.
Heidelcast.
By contrast, Though, THOUGH, signals a concessive clause, as I said, which is a way of communicating to the reader that one thing is happening despite the fact that something else is true. In this case, time is not in view. It's often used with the qualifier even though Louis was not very good at it. Joey Bag of Donuts always made him drive. Right? Again, even though Louis was not very good at it, Joey Bag of Donuts always made him drive. So though signals that, despite the fact that one thing is true of Louis, namely that he is a poor driver, another thing is also true, that Joey wanted to conduct the burglary himself, though concedes one thing and asserts another. Writers often confuse while for though by using while to signal a concessive. This is unnecessary. When you mean to signal the passage of time, use while. When you mean to express a concessive or perhaps a contrast, use though. Though virtually no one observes the distinction, while I have anything to say about it, I will continue to encourage writers to distinguish the two.
Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for more from the Heidelcast, brought to you by Heidelberg Reformation Association.org. Don't forget, when the coin in the coffer clinks, the cost of bandwidth shrinks. Copyright Heidelberg Reformation Association. All rights reserved. This is a Heidel Media production.
The best podcast, the Heidelcast.